It was a crisp Thursday morning at Reagan National Airport when Barron Trump, the youngest son of the sitting president of the United States, Donald J. Trump, arrived at the terminal accompanied by two discreet Secret Service agents. Unlike his high-profile father, Barron had built a quiet reputation for humility despite his family's fame. At just 19 years old, he was now an NYU freshman majoring in political science and digital innovation, and today he was headed to a tech convention in San Francisco. His travel arrangements were supposed to be impeccable. The White House had coordinated with Freedom Skies Airlines, a top-tier carrier that frequently served the executive branch, to ensure Barron would fly in a first-class suite. A fully enclosed pod with high-speed internet, lie-flat bed, gourmet meals, and, more importantly, security measures befitting the president's. Barron quietly moved through the private entrance, waving politely to a TSA officer who appeared stunned to see him. Everything seemed routine. His boarding pass was marked, Freedom 1, Seat 1, a first-class suite. But once on board, a slight wrinkle emerged. "Mr. Trump?" a tall flight attendant said awkwardly, avoiding eye contact. "I'm terribly sorry, but it appears there's been a last-minute seating reassignment. You've been moved to Business Select 4C. Barron blinked. "Excuse me?" "There was a system error," she said, her voice tight. "We've had to adjust seat allocations due to, an overbooking issue." One of the Secret Service agents stepped forward. "He's flying under an official White House itinerary," the agent said sharply. "Seat 1A was secured days ago." "I understand, sir," the flight attendant said, shifting nervously. "But someone else was placed in 1A. The boarding system can't override it now. You'll still receive priority service." Barron held up a hand. "It's okay," he said quietly, putting his carry-on in the overhead bin. "If it's just a seat, I can manage." That response, respectful and mature, was exactly why many Americans had quietly warmed up to Barron in recent years. He wasn't spoiled. He wasn't theatrical. And unlike most celebrity kids, he didn't chase headlines. But what neither he nor anyone else realized was that this seat reassignment wasn't a mistake. Minutes before boarding, a high-profile Hollywood executive, notorious for his hatred of the Trump administration, had made a series of angry calls demanding an upgrade. His assistant was heard on the phone saying, "Get me 1A. I don't care who it belongs to." Freedom Skies, perhaps fearing bad publicity or relishing the idea of snubbing the Trump name, had caved. As Barron settled into the downgraded Business Select seat, the atmosphere in the cabin shifted. A mother too rose behind him, nudged her teenage son. "That's the president's kid," she whispered. Whispers became murmurs. Some were shocked. Others chuckled smugly. One man, in a blazer with a Save Democracy button, muttered just loudly enough, "Guess even Trump's kid learns what economy feels like." Barron stayed silent, gazing out the window as if it didn't bother him. But his agent immediately began typing an encrypted message on his secure tablet. That message would set off a chain of events no one, not even the smug Hollywood executive now sipping champagne in 1A, saw coming. 8 minutes passed. Then the pilot's voice rang out overhead. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be experiencing a brief delay on departure. Please remain seated." What followed next would stun the entire cabin. A black SUV screeched to a halt on the tarmac. The plane's door reopened, and up the jet bridge, flanked by two sharply dressed corporate aides and looking pale as a ghost, came none other than Gerald Matheson, the president and CEO of Freedom Skies Airlines. As Gerald Matheson, president and CEO of Freedom Skies Airlines, stepped onto the aircraft, a suffocating silence swept through the cabin. It was rare, unheard of, really, for a corporate airline executive to make a personal appearance on a domestic flight already prepped for takeoff. Yet there he was, in an immaculate navy suit, visibly perspiring despite the cabin's cool air. He didn't say a word at first. He didn't have to. The lead flight attendant, clearly rattled, stiffened as Matheson approached her. Mr. Matheson?" she stammered, stepping aside. "Seat 1A, he said curtly. She looked down at the manifest on her tablet and hesitated. "Currently occupied by Mr. Ray Guthrie. We reassigned Barron Trump to Business Select due to—" "I know what happened," Matheson snapped. I read the override logs myself. And I read the White House preclearance request for 1A timestamped, certified, and approved. So please explain to me why my airline just downgraded the president's son without any protocol review. The color drained from her face. Passengers now craned their necks to watch. Phones were subtly angled upward. Everyone was recording. The man in 1A, Ray Guthrie, a studio head known more for political rants than film hits lately, leaned out from his pod with a smirk. Well, he said with a shrug, sipping his champagne. I assumed the seat was free. The system let me book it. Matheson turned slowly toward Guthrie. Mr. Guthrie, you bypassed protocol by using corporate override codes meant for VIP medical cases. We confirmed this 15 minutes ago. I'm a Diamond Titanium Elite, Guthrie said mockingly, tapping the badge on his carry-on. I bring your airline millions in first-class fares. And you're panicking because you bumped a teenager whose father happens to be the president. No, Matheson replied coolly. I'm correcting a serious ethical and procedural breach. And as of this moment, your elite status is under review. We take abuse of our systems seriously, no matter how famous you are. The entire cabin gasped. You can't be serious, Guthrie laughed, now trying to project dominance. You're humiliating a loyal customer in public? Over a seat? I'm restoring a rightful arrangement, correcting a corporate error, and protecting the safety of a federal family member. That's what I'm doing. Before Guthrie could protest further, 2 uniformed Freedom Skies officers arrived behind Matheson. Mr. Guthrie, we're going to ask you to gather your belongings. What? Are you throwing me off this plane? You'll be rebooked on the next available flight in first class, Matheson said. If you cooperate, we'll keep this professional. A brief standoff followed. Then, realizing the cameras were rolling, and his PR team would be spinning this for days, Guthrie stood up, sneered toward Barron Trump, and muttered, "This country's a joke." Barron didn't respond. He didn't need to. Moments later, the first-class suite door slid open once more, this time for Barron. The agents flanked him again as he moved quietly back to 1A. Matheson stood aside, almost reverently as Barron took his seat. Matheson leaned in and said softly, "On behalf of the airline, I offer my sincerest apologies, Mr. Trump. This should never have happened. You were treated unfairly." Barron nodded once. "Thank you for fixing it." Then Matheson turned to the rest of the cabin. "I want to apologize to all passengers for the delay," he announced. "But as president of this airline, I personally intervene when integrity is compromised. We now return to your scheduled flight." The door sealed. The plane began taxiing. And the nation, or at least everyone with a phone in hand, would soon be watching the video from 12B that would go viral before the flight even landed. Mobile phone Freedom Skies CEO confronts Hollywood exec after Trump's son is downgraded. Mobile phone, you disrespected the president's son. Viral clash erupts on tarmac. Mobile phone Barron Trump kept his cool. Airline CEO didn't. But what happened in the air next was perhaps even more shocking. Because just before meal service, a note was delivered to Barron by a flight attendant, sealed in the signature crest of the White House. Barron Trump unfolded the sealed note in his lap, the wax seal still warm from the White House communications desk. He recognized the writing immediately. It was from his mother, Melania. "Stay calm. You handled this with grace. Dad is proud. And you've just reminded the world what dignity looks like. We're watching the flight. See you soon." "Mom," he smiled subtly and folded the note, placing it in the inside pocket of his suit jacket. The world might still treat him as the quiet kid in the background of presidential photos, but moments like this showed how much he had grown. Still, he didn't want a scene. He didn't want revenge. But the world wasn't done watching. The flight reached cruising altitude. Cameras were still rolling, although sneakily now. A college student in row 10 whispered to his friend, "Dude, this is going to break the internet when we land." And he wasn't wrong. Back in the suite, Barron reclined slightly and pulled out his tablet. He opened a news app and refreshed. The headlines had already started populating. President Trump's son downgraded in mid-air snub. Airline CEO responds in person. Washington Times Freedom Skies faces firestorm after mishandling presidential family booking. The Hill hashtag Barron Trump trending as Americans applaud his humility under pressure. Twitter/X, the outcry was growing. Not just from conservatives either. Journalists, athletes, and even a few Hollywood actors were posting about the bizarre and public slight. It wasn't about partisanship anymore, it was about respect. One popular post read, "You don't have to like his dad to see what just happened was wrong. That kid handled it better than most adults." Suddenly, the cockpit intercom clicked again. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest joining us via satellite phone. President Donald J. Trump has requested to say a few words to the passengers aboard Flight 376 to San Francisco." The cabin gasped. People who had rolled their eyes at Barron just an hour ago now sat straight up in their seats. Barron sat frozen for a moment, eyes wide. The voice that came through the speaker was unmistakable, calm, composed, and pointed. "Hello, everyone. This is President Trump, and I want to thank you for your patience today. I understand there was a situation involving my son, Barron. He's on official White House travel for an education summit. Now, I wasn't thrilled to hear what happened, but I have to say, I'm proud of how my son handled it. He didn't cause a scene. He didn't shout or demand anything. He acted like a gentleman. That's what leadership looks like." The cabin remained dead silent. "To the airline CEO, Mr. Matheson, I want to personally thank you for stepping in. Mistakes happen. What matters is how we fix them. That's the American way." He paused for a moment, then added with his classic flair, "And to whoever thought they could push my son out of his seat, I hope they enjoy their next flight. Probably won't be on freedom skies." Laughter rippled gently through the cabin. "God bless you all. God bless our country. And Barron, I'll see you at dinner. Order the steak." The line clicked. The president was off. Barron let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He could feel all eyes on him again. A woman a few rows up turned and said, sincerely, "Your father's right. You handled yourself like a leader." "Thanks," Barron replied with a polite smile, trying not to squirm. What no one yet knew was that this simple in-flight fiasco would become a defining moment not just for Barron, but for an airline, an industry, and a national conversation about civility, entitlement, and character. The next few hours would shake corporate offices in Manhattan, D.C., and Hollywood alike, and the final twist would come, not from Barron or the airline, but from the Secret Service. Because what Barron didn't know yet was that the seat reassignment wasn't just petty. It might have been deliberate. The flight cruised calmly over the Rocky Mountains as passengers finally settled down with dinner trays and earbuds. But in the flight's rear, nestled inconspicuously near the crew galley, two members of the United States Secret Service weren't relaxing. Agent Samantha Greer tapped through secure communications on a hardened tablet. Her partner, Agent Del Rio, leaned in. "Are we still looking at a system glitch?" he asked under his breath. Greer shook her head, her face tight with concern. "No, this wasn't a software issue. This was human override. And whoever did it, they used Level 4 security clearance meant for Homeland Emergency medical transfers." Del Rio's brows rose. "That's not a simple mistake. It gets worse," Greer said, sliding her tablet around. On the screen was a digital log of the override. The user ID belonged to an operations manager named Kristen Powell, based at Freedom Sky's headquarters in Los Angeles. The timestamp showed the override had happened exactly 8 minutes before Barron's boarding window opened. Del Rio narrowed his eyes. Meaning it was preemptive. They knew he was coming, and they intentionally reassigned his seat to Ray Guthrie. "We checked Guthrie's reservation. He booked business class just 72 hours ago. He was never supposed to be in First Elite." Del Rio leaned back against the galley wall, exhaling slowly. "So what's the angle? Political? Sabotage? Personal vendetta? Could be any of the above," Greer said. "But here's the kicker, Kristen Powell used to work in media relations. For CNN. That stopped him cold." Back in 1A, Barron adjusted his seat as his steak dinner arrived, accompanied by freshly baked bread and imported sparkling water. He thanked the attendant with a nod, still unaware of the quiet investigation unraveling behind the curtain. Meanwhile, Freedom Sky's CEO Gerald Matheson was still on board, seated mid-cabin with his laptop open and earpiece in. He was on a call with his executive team back at HQ. "This is a 5-alarm fire," his chief legal officer said. "Every media outlet is running the story. Our shareholder Slack channels are buzzing, and 2 senators just tweeted about it." "I don't care about the optics," Matheson barked. "I want to know who gave the override, and I want her out before this plane lands. Fire her. Now." "There's more," the voice on the other end said reluctantly. "Kristen left the building 2 hours ago, without clocking out. Security checked. She left her badge and wiped her desk. She's gone, Gerald." He froze. "Gone? Like, quit?" "More like vanished. No notice. No phone. Just gone." Matheson's chest tightened. Something wasn't right. This wasn't just a PR disaster. It was feeling like a coordinated hit meant to embarrass the president's family in the most humiliating and viral way possible. Deliberate. Calculated. And it almost worked. If not for one thing. Barron's calm. Had he thrown a tantrum, it would have been the talk of every late-night show. But because he kept his composure, the country didn't laugh. They listened. They watched. And now they were asking the real question. Who wanted to sabotage a teenage presidential son? And why? As the plane began its descent into San Francisco, Agent Greer stepped into the aisle discreetly and walked to 1A. She leaned down and whispered in Barron's ear. "There's something you should know, sir." Barron raised an eyebrow. Greer nodded. "We believe the seat reassignment was intentional. Your father's already been briefed. There will be a full federal investigation. You may be contacted to testify about what you experienced." Barron absorbed that in silence. Then he said only, "Tell them I'll cooperate." Just then, the plane's tires kissed the tarmac. The engines roared as the brakes engaged. A few rows behind Barron, phones were already buzzing. News alerts, Twitter feeds, political podcasts erupting with speculation. The door opened, and a line of black SUVs was already waiting. When the cabin doors opened, sunlight poured in, but all eyes were on the motorcade awaiting at the terminal. A half-dozen black SUVs, 2 DHS vans, and local law enforcement stood lined up with practiced precision. The moment Barron Trump stepped off the plane, he was flanked by Secret Service agents and quietly ushered through a private jetway away from the press. So Gerald Matheson remained behind, slumped in his seat. His phone buzzed again. This time it was the White House Chief of Staff. "You'll want to be in Washington by morning," the voice said coldly. "The president expects a full briefing in the Oval." Matheson grunted and hung up, staring out the window as Barron's vehicle rolled off onto the tarmac. President Donald Trump stood in the West Wing surrounded by his closest advisors. The mood was tense, but the president was composed, cold, deliberate. "I don't care who she worked for," Trump said, referring to Kristen Powell, the former airline operations manager. "I want a full background report. School records, job history, family, connections to any PACs or media. If she sneezed on Twitter in 2015, I want to know about it." One of the national security staffers spoke up. "We traced a payment to her account, cryptocurrency, roughly $120,000, routed from a dark money shell out of Brussels. It hit 2 days before she made the override." Another aide added grimly, "She was part of an activist network, anti-administration. They were looking for ways to embarrass and destabilize Trump family optics before the general election." That's a direct quote from a now-deleted group chat. Trump didn't react immediately. He just stared at the dossier in front of him. "They targeted my son." "Yes, sir." He clenched his jaw. "And he still handled it better than 90% of this town. Maybe we've underestimated him." Barron was escorted to a secured hotel suite overlooking the bay. As he stood on the balcony, the city sparkled below, but his mind wasn't on the skyline. It was on the whirlwind of the past 24 hours. He'd gone from attending a youth leadership summit to being the centerpiece of a national media storm. His phone buzzed. A message from his sister Ivanka. "Proud of you. You made the family look strong. Can't fake grace under pressure. Love you." He smiled, but before he could reply, There was a knock at the door. It was Secret Service Agent Greer. Once again. "We found Powell," she said bluntly. "She tried to flee through Mexico but got flagged by facial recognition. She's in federal custody now." Barron absorbed the news, quiet for a moment. "I don't want her hurt," he finally said. "But the American people deserve to know the truth. They need to know that this was about more than a seat." Greer nodded. "We'll make sure they do. And sir, your father's instructed us to let you make a statement if you wish. Unfiltered." Barron turned back toward the view, then said, "Get me a camera." That evening, as major networks buzzed about the seat scandal, Freedom Skies, and the political implications, something unexpected happened. A live stream appeared on the official White House YouTube and X accounts. It was Barron in a navy blazer. With the presidential seal in soft focus behind him, he looked directly into the lens and spoke with quiet conviction. "I was raised to believe that every American deserves dignity, no matter where they sit on a plane. I didn't ask for special treatment. I didn't want a viral moment. I just wanted to represent my country with respect. But what happened on that flight wasn't about me. It was about a growing culture that celebrates humiliation over humility, that applauds chaos over character. We have to stop that. We have to rise above it. If you're watching this and you feel like you've been pushed aside or silenced because of your last name, your beliefs, or who your family is, don't lash out. Rise up. Show them what integrity looks like. That's what I tried to do. And to the American people, thank you. You reminded me that character still matters." The video exploded across social media. Within 2 hours, it had over 40 million views. Even MSNBC aired the full clip. A prominent liberal journalist tweeted, "I've never agreed with the Trumps, but that kid just delivered the most measured, mature speech I've seen all year. Respect." Freedom Skies issued a full-page apology in every major newspaper the next morning. C.O. Matheson resigned the following week. Congress began bipartisan hearings on corporate sabotage and airline protocols for security-cleared individuals. Kristen Powell was indicted on federal charges including conspiracy to interfere with government operations and cyber misconduct tied to political motives. But the biggest shift was cultural. For the first time, Americans began seeing Barron Trump not as a background figure, but as a young man stepping into his own light. He returned to D.C. to a hero's welcome. Not just among Republicans, but among many who had simply grown tired of division. A week later, he walked into the Oval Office where his father was reviewing briefings. Donald Trump looked up, smiled, and said, "Next time you fly, remind them who they're dealing with." Barron smirked. "I will, Dad, but I think they already know."